Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Hanjung Liuya. Chapter 11. Demonic Monk. Part 1. It had been trapped inside a body for a long time. The owner of that body possessed a stronger will and determination than it had anticipated. When it tried to quickly take over the body, the owner blocked the energy flow and cut off his own consciousness. It's no use resisting. Seizing the consciousness was only a matter of time. No matter how strong-willed, he was bound to succumb eventually. Once the weakened body and consciousness were captured, this body could be taken over. It won't be long now. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, an unexpected variable appeared. Just a little longer and it could have broken through the blocked consciousness, but an obstacle arose. Who are you? Ordinary humans cannot perceive their existence. But this being knew how to control it with strange techniques. Are you trying to drive me out? Thus, the being began a battle of wills. It was a matter of driving out or taking over. Then, the being was deceived by the one wielding this bizarre technique and ended up inside a wooden doll. How dare you trick me? The resentful being grew even more furious. It felt this anger would only subside after taking over that body again and wringing the neck of the one who tried to expel it. But in the middle, it was interrupted. So the being targeted not the body it had been trying to possess, but the one who interfered. A good body indeed. A young body. Unlike the body it had originally tried to take over, it wasn't overflowing with vitality, but rather, it was inclined towards energy, making it even easier to run rampant. If it was this body, it was worth possessing. Since it was younger than the previous body, the sense of self and will would also be weaker. I'll take over quickly. It just needed to erase the bastard's consciousness. By stimulating the consciousness and trapping it, the sense of self would eventually weaken. However, the being couldn't hide its astonishment. What the hell was the owner of this body? Primal desires that felt like they would pierce through the lungs. It was the desire to kill. Is this guy really a living being? Death. Darkness. Anger. Murderous intent. All of these mixed together were full of energy. For the being, this desire filled with death and killing intent was an irresistible instinct. It's the best. The being felt ecstasy at this desire. But soon it was also gripped by a sense of disappointment. If left alone, it would have bloomed into the most magnificent desire, but something was suppressing it, preventing it from fully blossoming. I'll eliminate that factor suppressing your desire. If the desire hadn't fully bloomed yet, it was better to completely unleash it. After all, the ultimate body needed a perfect mind. But then, an unbelievable thing happened. What are you? The bastard recognized it. It tried to trap his consciousness in the current reality but failed. This can't be. How did he recognize it? It was impossible for a living being to directly perceive or contact it. I asked what you are. Then there was no choice. Even if the method was a bit rough, it had to forcefully proceed with the possession. It chose to forcefully possess. The possession of the body had already begun, and if it devoured the will and consciousness, he would have no choice but to surrender the body. SSS. Dash. For the first time, it felt perplexed. The possession was occurring in reverse. The energy that had penetrated the body was instead being absorbed by the bastard. It happened at an unimaginable speed. Stop. What are you babbling about? Stop it. You're noisy. No. I said you're noisy, didn't I? I'll give up. I'll leave, so stop it. At this rate, it might be completely devoured. It tried to escape somehow. But now the bastard was grasping it. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Phew. Diviner Myosin let out an exhausted sigh, then picked up the sword that had fallen on the floor. He thought it would be light, but the weight of the sword was quite heavy. Gripping the sword with both hands, Diviner Myosin looked at the Manor Master with a tense expression. Can I do it? Even if he had exorcised demons and such before, he had never killed a living human. So when he actually tried to do it, he felt nervous. But he had to do it. I have to kill him. Only then could he complete the madam's request and pin everything on this guy. He would say that while possessed by the demon in the Manor Master, he went berserk and killed the Manor Master. If that happened, with the madam's help, he could naturally dispose of this guy. Let's do it. He had to hurry. If this guy's guard outside came in, things would go wrong. Diviner Myosin tried to take a step towards the Manor Master. Right at that moment. Flinch. Diviner Myosin, who was about to take a step, flinched. Gripped by a spine-chilling coldness that made his skin crawl, Myosin slowly turned his head with a stiff expression. Myosin couldn't hide his bewilderment for a moment. He doubted his own eyes. A hazy figure larger than an average adult by 2 heads was glaring at him, emitting a ghastly gaze. This is a giant monk in bloody robes with a skull rosary around his neck. The monk's face, devoid of any vitality, was lifeless. It was a demon? Myosin could tell this being was undoubtedly a demon. Those like him, diviners, called them demons or vengeful spirits, but people also referred to them as ghosts. Trickle. Cold sweat ran down Myosin's forehead. Had his spiritual sight heightened? This was the first time he saw a demon with such a clear form with his own 2 eyes. Damn it. Myosin cursed harshly inwardly. There was no way his spiritual sight would suddenly heighten. This demon must be of a much higher level and possess a stronger vengeful spirit than he could handle. That was why it could manifest its own form like this. Clang. Throwing away the sword, Myosin formed hand seals. Papak. Lian. Papak. Buying. Papak. Do you? Papak. Ju. Papapapak. Along with that, Myosin, who had formed sword seals and the diamond fist mudra, chanted an incantation towards the demon. All palace's mighty spirits, the great Yin soldiers and generals appear in the 5 classics. I call out once to the master of the household gods, evil demons, ghosts, and monsters, get out and leave. He was in the middle of chanting the incantation. At that moment, the demon in the form of a demonic monk approached him, moving like mist. Swish. It's useless. He had the 7 stars descending talisman attached to his chest to protect his body. Although exorcism would be difficult, it was impossible for this demon to directly affect him. Thwack. Ugh. At that moment, Myosin, who was hit in the face, had no choice but to stop chanting the incantation. It wasn't just that it hurt, but Myosin blinked in surprise. How? The one who hit him was none other than Mok Jiangun. How was he moving when he should have been unable to control his body after being possessed by the demon in the Manor Master? He should have been suppressed by the suppressed talisman. Myosin's eyes, which had been bewildered, wavered as they discovered something. A hazy black thread was flowing from Mok Jiangun's chest, connecting to the demonic monk demon. Seeing this, Myosin realized something had gone wrong. How could this happen? What that meant was one thing. The fact that the souls were connected meant it was a familiar. A familiar literally means to make an otherworldly being belong to and follow oneself. But the reason Myosin was surprised was simple. How did he do it to a demon? That demon was a vengeful spirit. It was a soul that had become a lump of resentment to resolve its grudges, and they didn't follow people. It wouldn't be strange to call them evil. Occasionally, among excellent diviners, there were those who controlled familiar, but those were old things or a kind of benevolent mischievous spirit. It doesn't make sense. But how could such an evil demon filled with killing intent become a familiar? Moreover, that guy wasn't even someone who had learned divination techniques or Taoism. It was completely incomprehensible. If an ordinary person was possessed by a demon of that level, it would be normal for them to have their body taken over or lose their life. How? Can I remove this? What? Pack. Just then, Mok Jiangun reached out and removed something from his chest. The fluttering yellow paper was none other than... Huh? The 7 stars descending talisman. At this, Myosin's eyes widened. It was that talisman that protected him from the demon. But if that was removed... Swish! The pale giant demonic monk was approaching with a ghastly smile. Surprised by this, Myosin hurriedly tried to form seals to chant a protective incantation instead of the talisman. However... Thwack! Ugh! Mok Jiangun kicked him in the abdomen. Myosin, who was hit in the abdomen, collapsed in a shrimp-like posture due to the pain that felt like his internal organs were turned inside out. He tried to form seals again while suppressing the urge to vomit, but, gah! Myosin's waist bent in the opposite direction. His face darkened and his veins bulged. Thump! Thump! Myosin could tell. The demon had entered his body and was trying to kill him. If he didn't quickly form seals and use divination techniques, he might be devoured by the demon and lose his life. Myosin tried to form a seal with one hand, mustering all his strength. But then... Squish! Mok Jiangun stepped on that hand of his. So that he couldn't do anything. Surprised, Myosin panted and pleaded with all his might. Huff huff. Why, young master, please spare me. Please, if you just let me live. I'll do anything. I don't need that. If it's because I tricked you, no. Mok Jiangun shook his head. You did it to survive, so what can you do about it? But you also heard where the seal and secret manual are, right? At this, Myosin was at a loss for words. Separate from him deceiving and whatnot, wasn't Mok Jiangun saying that he had already intended to kill him? Looking at him with an absurd expression, Mok Jiangun smiled and said, so just die. Shivers. His mouth was smiling, but his eyes were motionless like a dead person. That appearance felt even more eerie than the demon. Guh. Guh. Blood flowed from Myosin's mouth, his entire face bulging with veins. Then, his body that had been convulsing gradually stopped. Chapter 12. Demonic Monk. Part 2. Ugh. The middle-aged man with a scar under his left eye, sitting cross-legged on the floor while eating a sweet, sighed as he looked towards the pavilion leading to the main hall. The pavilion, usually guarded by escort warriors, was empty. Is this really okay? His name was Jang Myongin. He held the position of Inner Manor Master, the head of security for the main hall at Yun Mok Sword Manor. In his youth, he was a renowned expert in martial arts near Shaoxing, Zhejiang. 19 years ago, during a pirate suppression campaign in the Hayang region, he formed a connection with the Manor Master and joined Yun Mok Sword Manor. Manor Master. The Manor Master of his younger days was a true hero. Jang Myongin admired him and believed everything he did was right. But how did things end up like this? Inner Manor Master, you don't really wish for that lowly courtesan's son to inherit the position of the great Yun Mok Sword Manor, do you? That's... Think carefully about what's best for Yun Mok Sword Manor. At first, he tried not to get involved. However, he couldn't help but be swayed by the words of the first wife, Lady Suk. Even if Mok Yucheon, the youngest son, had overwhelmingly superior martial arts, he lacked a strong foundation and allies within the family. If he were to inherit the clan, it would eventually lead to the division of Yun Mok Sword Manor. Yes, this is the right thing to do. Even if the eldest son, Mok Yang-ho, was somewhat tyrannical, he was still the firstborn. His maternal family was none other than the Jinhua Suk clan, more than capable of supporting him. In many ways, it was right for him, as the eldest son, to be the successor. However, there was one thing that bothered him. Even the physician couldn't do anything. How could a mere diviner? It won't take long. Just pretend not to know for about an hour. He's a skilled diviner from Mengqing. If he finds out, there will be no need to clash with the retainers and the second son, Makun Payan. The Manor Master Seal. With the seal, one could appoint a successor. It could also prevent the division among the retainers. Is it possible? However, he couldn't shake off a hint of doubt. How could a mere diviner, who only dealt with sorcery, find a way to make the manor master, who was on the verge of drawing his last breath, reveal the location of the seal? It seemed like a waste of time with pointless actions. It can't be that they planned to intimidate the weakened manor master with medicine or something to find out, right? No matter how much the eldest son, Mok Yang-ho, wanted to become the successor, that was unacceptable. It was a disgrace to the manor master, to whom he had pledged his loyalty. Clench. Jang Myongyan's hand clenched tightly. No, that's not it. Although he was told to keep the surroundings empty for about an hour, he decided to check just in case. They told him not to interfere, so there shouldn't be any significant issues if he just took a look. With that thought, inner manor master Jang Myongyan passed the pavilion and headed towards the main hall. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Swish. Mok Jaeyonan grabbed the neck of the diviner Myosin, whose veins were bulging grotesquely. Myosin's pulse had stopped, his breath cut off. Confirming this, Mok Jaeyonan turned around with an expressionless face. Not bad. It didn't look like he had died by human hands. A mysterious death. That's how Myosin's death appeared. Whoosh. At that moment, a pale, giant monk appeared above the dead Myosin. A string of clattering skull beads hung around his neck. Mok Jaeyonan reached out and touched them. The monk's eerie, ghostly white eyes, emitting a sinister light, trembled. You wear interesting things around your neck. The reason was simple. It allowed direct contact with Mok Jaeyonan's ethereal form. As Mok Jaeyonan fiddled with the skull beads, he asked, You said you'd be a faithful slave, so what should I call you? The giant monk, who had been standing still, mumbled something softly in response to Mok Jaeyonan's question. His lips barely seemed to move. This was not something that could be heard by human ears. However, Mok Jaeyonan heard it clearly. Demonic monk? Sounds more like a title than a name. Well, as long as I can call you something, it doesn't matter. The strange being referred to itself as the demonic monk. Looking at demonic monk, Mok Jaeyonan smirked and turned his head to look at the unconscious manor master, whose arm had been severed. Mok Jaeyonan stroked his own chin. He was contemplating whether it would be better to kill the manor master or keep him alive. The contemplation didn't last long. If he were to kill the manor master immediately, it would put him in a difficult position. So it was better to keep him alive. Then we need to change the scenario a bit. Demonic monk, can you move him in front of the manor master? In response to Mok Jaeyonan's words, the demonic monk, who had been standing still, shook his head. Mok Jaeyonan muttered with a hint of disappointment, You can't do it? He thought that since the demonic monk had killed the diviner, he would be able to exert physical strength, but unexpectedly, he couldn't perform such a simple physical task. Or was he pretending not to be able to do it on purpose? Moreover, whoosh. The moment the materialized part of his body was exposed to sunlight, it disappeared like a mirage. The phenomenon was similar to a shadow vanishing in the light. It's a difficult domain to understand. It was intriguing but hard to comprehend. Mok Jaeyonan's gaze turned to the bookshelf of the dead diviner Myosin. Various books related to sorcery were placed there. If he referred to those, could he gain a better understanding of this strange being? Thump. Thump. At that moment, the sound of someone walking on the wooden floor outside the room could be heard. Soon, the voice of the escort guard came from outside the room. Is it not finished yet? Come in. At those words, the escort guard opened the door and entered. The guard's eyes widened upon entering the room. What? What is this? The guard was startled by the sight of the dead diviner Myosin. He expected Myosin to be performing sorcery, but seeing him dead in the meantime was quite shocking. Strangely, the escort guard didn't seem to notice the demonic monk. Mok Jaeyonan pointed to the left side with a nod and asked, Do you see anything here? Pardon? It seems you can't see it. Ah. I see. Pardon? No, I wasn't talking to you, guard. At those words, the guard frowned. Then was he just talking to himself? While the guard was puzzled, Mok Jayangan looked to his left and spoke incomprehensible words. No, I don't think there's a need to reveal yourself. Young master? What are you talking about? Mok Jayangan smiled at the confused guard and said, don't worry about it. Rather, could you move that diviner over there in front of the manor master? No, young master, why is the diviner? The state of the dead diviner Myosin was extremely bizarre. The veins on his entire face were grotesquely bulging, and he was dead, his expression filled with pain, shock, and fear. How was he murdered? Is this what it looks like to be murdered? Poison? It was strange to call it poison. It was extraordinarily grotesque. Could it be that this fellow didn't kill him? Even if his blood was toxic, it was quite different from that. It didn't seem like he was killed by physical means either, so what was it? While the guard was puzzled, Mok Jayangan spoke. Instead of just staring, could you move him? Why yes. Yes. When Mok Jayangan repeated the same words twice, the guard hastily moved the dead diviner Myosin in front of the manor master, sensing the impatience. Then Mok Jayangan said, place him there as naturally as possible, as if he died while going berserk on his own. What? How was he supposed to place the body to make it look like he died while going berserk on his own? The guard, at a loss, simply laid Myosin's corpse down haphazardly. He did as he was told, but what was the intention? Could it be that he's trying to make it seem like the diviner did all this? Looking at the state of the messy room, it did seem plausible. The only fortunate thing was that the manor master was still alive. Although his arm was severed, it was better than being dead. Young master. What will you do now? I forgot something important. In response to the guard's question, Mok Jayangan picked up the sword that had fallen on the floor. With the sword in hand, Mok Jayangan approached the bed where the manor master lay and swung it back and forth. Swish swish. Let's do it like this. The diviner, who was trying to treat the manor master with sorcery, was possessed by an evil spirit, severed the manor master's arm, and tried to kill him, but we stopped him. The escort guard clicked his tongue inwardly at those words. He had come up with a plausible excuse to escape the situation. Indeed, looking at the bizarre way the diviner Myosin had died, it did seem as if he had been possessed by something. However, will they easily believe it? The first wife was not a woman to be trifled with. Just as the guard was contemplating whether to simply not say anything, he cautiously spoke. Young master. If we try to deceive them clumsily, it may arouse suspicion. Is it clumsy? It was truly a coincidence, but if we say that we appeared at the perfect moment to save the manor master, the first wife will not easily accept it. Moreover, this diviner was hired by her, so even more so. I see. We need to make it more believable. Swish. At that moment, Mok Jayangan gripped the sword's handle in reverse. The guard was wondering what he was trying to do when suddenly, Mok Jayangan brought the tip of the sword to his own thigh. Why, young master? What are you doing? We need to make it more believable. This should be enough. Well, wait. Before the guard could stop him. Stab. The sharp blade pierced through Mok Jayangan's thigh. The guard's expression stiffened at the sight. He wasn't just pinching himself but stabbing his own thigh with a sword. Was there not a moment of hesitation? What was even more absurd was that despite the pain he must have felt, Mok Jayangan didn't let out a single groan. No, there was no change in his expression. Does he not feel pain? Even the guard himself would have gritted his teeth or made a grimace to endure the pain. Yet, this fellow showed almost no change in his expression, as if he felt no pain at all. Ruthless bastard. The guard couldn't help but be astonished. It was remarkable that he stabbed his own thigh without hesitation to avoid suspicion, but he was truly a cold-blooded person. There was no need to go this far. This is the most effective way. I'll stop the bleeding. No, I need to lose more blood to look a bit pale. The guard found this fellow increasingly frightening and terrifying. Someone this crazy should never be made an enemy. Bang! At that moment, the door swung open, and someone barged in. The guard was startled to see who it was. Inner Manor Master? The middle-aged man with a scar under his left eye was none other than Inner Manor Master Jiang Myongin. It wasn't really surprising. As the head of security for the main hall, he was originally supposed to be stationed here. Rather, it was strange that he had been absent from his post. Ching! Inner Manor Master Jiang Myongin drew his sword from his waist and pointed it at them. What have you done? In response to his rebuke, the escort guard waved his hands. Inner Manor Master, it's a misunderstanding. The young master and I, before he could even offer an explanation. More importantly, we need to take care of the Manor Master first. Thud. Mok Jiangun collapsed beside him, swaying. The escort guard was momentarily at a loss for words upon seeing this. Did he just pretend to faint? And while saying that the Manor Master's well-being should be prioritized over his own? Chapter 13. Demonic Monk. Part 3. How can this be? Physician No couldn't hide his astonishment as he checked the pulse. Just this morning, it seemed as if the Manor Master's pulse would stop at any moment. But now, there was vitality as his pulse beat. In just a few hours. His complexion has improved too. The symptoms of unknown cause had all disappeared. Although he had weakened somewhat from lying unconscious in bed for a long time, there was a high possibility of recovery if he recuperated well. However, the problem is his consciousness. The Manor Master had been unconscious for quite a while. Because he hadn't regained consciousness, the Yun Mok Sword Manor was in turmoil over the issue of succession. Since he was recovering, there was a high probability of him waking up, but it was uncertain when that would be. If something were to happen to him before then. At that moment, a sharp female voice reached his ears. How is he? Physician No slowly raised his head. The voice belonged to the first wife, Lady Suk. Her expression was different from usual. Just this morning, her eyes were filled with arrogance and determination. Physician No had felt an ominous premonition. Something is off. Physician No sensed that the situation was unusual. When he had hurried here, the Manor Master's arm was severed, and the surroundings were filled with traces of sorcery, such as talismans and red threads. But the diviner who had performed the sorcery was found dead. The third young master was involved in the process. What on earth is happening? Physician No cautiously observed Lady Suk's eyes. Her eyes were trembling strangely. It was the kind of reaction that would appear when something had gone wrong. Things must not have gone as planned. Although the Manor Master's arm was severed, his complexion had improved significantly. As Lady Suk was also a martial artist, she would have learned martial arts and be able to assess his condition to some extent. If so, she would have already noticed that the situation had improved compared to the morning. Yet, she showed no signs of joy, which meant... Could it be that she wasn't trying to heal him through the diviner, but rather plotting something with sorcery? It wasn't far-fetched to think so. Everyone knew that the Manor Master was considering the youngest young master, Mok Yucheon, as his successor. In fact, from the perspective of the first wife, she wouldn't want the Manor Master to wake up. Has his condition improved a bit? When Lady Suk asked again, Physician No hesitated for a moment. In this room, there were only the two of them. If he were to tell her that the Manor Master would wake up soon, he feared that Lady Suk might do something unexpected. After pondering, Physician No cautiously spoke. His complexion has brightened, and his pulse has improved, but his condition is still poor. It's because the illness has been prolonged. It's best to consider it as a momentary resurgence before death. Momentary resurgence before death. It was a saying that referred to a brief surge of vitality before death, likening it to the sky brightening momentarily just before sunset. In fact, it wasn't true, but he deliberately said so. However, Physician No was inwardly exasperated. Although she let out a sigh as if she was saddened, Lady Sook's expression and eyes were closer to relief. It was undoubtedly because she didn't want the Manor Master to recover. Physician No looked at the Manor Master and spoke inwardly. Manor Master. There's no time. You must wake up. Otherwise, there was no telling what Lady Sook might do. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Lady Sook, the first wife, regained her usual arrogant expression as she stepped outside. As she exited to the wooden porch, Inner Manor Master Jang Myongin, the one-eyed female warrior Hoang who served as her escort, and two maids were waiting for her. Lady Sook approached Inner Manor Master Jang Myongin and spoke. Is the cause of death certain? In response to that question, Inner Manor Master Jang Myongin nodded and quietly replied. It's certain. He didn't die from physical trauma. I've seen countless corpses for a long time, but that. Jang Myongin gestured with his eyes to where the corpse of the dead diviner Myosin lay. It was covered with a rough cloth, but the exposed skin was grotesquely bulging with veins. Even she had never seen such a corpse before. Lady Sook turned her head away from the corpse and asked in a low voice. What did they say? According to the escort warrior, he came to visit the sick. Visit the sick? Yes. Then the diviner went berserk as if possessed by something, severed the Manor Master's arm, and tried to kill him. What a mess. I apologize. I should have at least guarded the entrance of the pavilion. Jang Myongin bowed and apologized. She shook her head at this. What can be done about what has already happened? But do you really think so? What do you mean by think so? Do you really believe that the child came to visit the sick and accidentally discovered it? Based on the state of the corpse and the circumstances, it seems to be the case. Seems to be? Young Master Mok Jayongun even suffered an injury where his thigh was pierced by a sword. The bleeding was severe, and it could have been dangerous. From Jang Myongin's perspective, that was the case. An injury of that degree was difficult to self-inflict. If it had been a slight cut by a sword without danger or minimal bleeding, it could be doubted, but this left no room for suspicion. Despite this explanation, she still didn't let go of her doubtful gaze. Seeing this, Jang Myongin understood. It was because she viewed all the young masters, except for the eldest, unfavorably. At that moment, she asked. Where is that child now? Pardon? I'm talking about Mok Jayongun. I hurriedly stopped the bleeding for the third young master, but I sent him to the infirmary for treatment. The infirmary? Yes. Her gaze turned towards the infirmary located on the west side of the main building. Soon, her footsteps followed her gaze. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. A pleasant scent. Mok Jayongun sniffed and smiled. The scent of various medicinal herbs, which he hadn't smelled in a long time since descending the mountain, immersed him in nostalgia. Memories of following his grandfather to gather medicinal herbs. Recalling those fresh and beautiful memories, conflicting emotions welled up in a corner of his heart once again. The demonic monk's eyes, with only white pupils, flickered with interest. It was influenced by the intense killing intent. Ordinary killing intent wasn't particularly influential to ghosts, but what emanated from Mok Jayongun was different. It was so intense that even ghosts found it unpleasant. It was a darkness qualitatively different from the resentment created by the environment. It was almost primitive in nature. At that moment, Mok Jayongun asked in a low voice. So, did you find it? The demonic monk nodded in response to that question. Where is it? The demonic monk pointed to a wall filled with medicinal herb drawers. At first glance, the entire wall seemed to be filled with drawers for storing medicinal herbs. But the demonic monk pointed there. The medicinal herb drawer that the demonic monk pointed to had Ouyang written on it. When the bark of the parasol tree was dried in a shaded place for a long time, it became a medicinal herb called Ouyang, which wasn't commonly used. It makes sense. They deliberately targeted a medicinal herb drawer that wasn't frequently used. The reason Mok Jayangan had the demonic monk confirm this was because of the words that had come from the manor master's mouth. Medicinal. Hall. Underground. Jong, stone, door, inside. However, there was no entrance leading underground inside the infirmary. He had expected that to be the case. If it was a valuable item that a woman like the first wife would target, there was no way it would be placed where everyone could see it. Well, I'll find out when I check. Mok Jayangan surveyed his surroundings. Currently, the infirmary was filled with people working there, including the pharmacist. With many eyes watching and ears listening, it seemed difficult to verify. It seemed that he would have to wait until late at night. Just then. Creak. The one who opened the door and entered the infirmary was none other than guard Go Chan. Go Chan approached Mok Jayangan. Mok Jayangan said to him, "You're a bit late." At those words, Go Chan almost frowned for a moment. The task Mok Jayangan had assigned him wasn't as simple as fetching water. It wasn't a task that could be done in an instant, yet he complained about being late. It was truly unfair. "Where is it?" In response to Mok Jayangan's question, Go Chan took out 2 books from his bosom. "Only 2 books?" Go Chan grumbled at Mok Jayangan's disappointed tone. "These were secretly removed before they were burned." Before they were burned? Yes, the escort warriors guarding the main building are burning the diviner's bookshelf and all his belongings. "Oh, really?" Mok Jayangan clicked his tongue regretfully at those words. He had been interested in the diviner's sorcery and wanted to examine the books he possessed. But among the many books, only 2 were salvaged. Synopsis of various philosophers, basic writings of the school of Yin and Yang, introductory writings on the strange and unusual. Those were the titles of the 2 books. Go Chan had managed to remove the 2 thickest books among the ones he had seen. It seemed he would have to be satisfied with these, as disappointing as it was. "Good work. But young master, why do you need the books the diviner had?" Go Chan stopped mid-sentence. Then he put the books he was about to hand over to Mok Jayangan back into his bosom. Mok Jayangan looked at him with a puzzled expression, wondering why he did that. But soon, he understood the reason. "Step back for a moment." "Yes." As new footsteps approached from outside the infirmary and said something, the escort warriors guarding the entrance vacated their positions. Creak. As the door opened, someone revealed themselves. It was a middle-aged lady dressed in fancy attire adorned with precious metals. Go Chan, surprised, bowed his head and greeted her. "Greetings to the First Madam." First Madam? She was none other than Lady Suk, the first wife of the Yun Mok Sword Manor. Mok Jayangan's eyes flickered with interest. She was the woman mentioned in the information file given by Guard Gam. It was stated that Lady Suk, the First Madam, was more dangerous and needed more caution than the eldest young master, Mok Yang Ho. She was from the martial arts family of Jinhua Siaka clan and had considerable martial arts skills. She was also described as a cunning woman. Oh my! Go Chan was equally perplexed by her appearance. Although Mok Jayangan's appearance was indistinguishable from the real one, Guard Gam had strongly advised to avoid meeting people from the Mok family as much as possible to prevent any unexpected situations. "It is the First Madam's order. Everyone, leave." At the command of Hong, the one-eyed female warrior escorting Lady Suk, everyone in the infirmary went outside. Rustle rustle. As everyone was sent out, Guard Go Chan sensed that something was wrong. He had never directly clashed with her, so he had no idea what this was about. At that very moment, Lady Suk approached Mok Jayangan, who had only raised his upper body on the bed. Go Chan hurriedly gestured with his eyes. "Greet her. Greet her." Understanding this, Mok Jayangan clasped his hands together and bowed his head in greeting. "Please forgive me for not being able to stand up due to my injured leg." He greeted her better than expected. However, the critical point was from here on. The stark difference between the fake and the real one was the voice and manner of speaking. Fortunately, this fake Mok Jayangan had a similar voice to the dead real Mok Jayangan, so it sounded somewhat similar during practice, but he was worried if it would work. Although the young masters, except for the eldest, rarely have direct encounters with the first madam, Lady Sook was more sensitive and suspicious than expected. If they were exposed here, the worst situation might unfold. At that moment, Lady Sook, who had approached right in front of him, spoke. "I'm not here just to receive a mere greeting." Phew. For a moment, Go-chan almost let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it seemed that Lady Sook hadn't noticed. It seemed that the fake was more indistinguishable from the real one than expected. It was still like walking on thin ice, but if they didn't make mistakes, they could overcome this moment. Squeeze. Go-chan's eyes widened. It was because Lady Sook suddenly pressed on Mok Jae-un's injured thigh. Mok Jae-un lowered his head as if in pain and let out a groan. Arg. Damn it. Go-chan couldn't hide his perplexity at the sight. It seemed that the issue wasn't whether he was real or fake. Judging by her attitude, she was suspicious of whether Mok Jae-un was truly injured or not. What did you see and hear there? Squeeze. Ugh. Lady Sook pressed even harder on Mok Jae-un's wound and spoke. Seeing this, Go-chan couldn't sit still. That crazy bastard couldn't possibly endure the pain. But if he made a slip of the tongue in this situation, not only would it arouse the first madam's suspicion, but it would also make her an enemy. Madam. There seems to be some misunderstanding. Xing. As Go-chan stepped forward to stop her, Hong, Lady Sook's escort warrior, drew her sword and pointed it at his neck. Don't interfere. Damn that wench. Go-chan was at a loss for what to do. If he couldn't speak, Mok Jae-un had to handle this situation alone. Now, he had to endure and lower his head to escape this situation. Hong, the escort warrior of Lady Sook, was glaring at him, so he couldn't even exchange glances or mouth words anymore. Squeeze. At that moment, Lady Sook pressed even harder on Mok Jae-un's thigh and urged. You may not know, but it's rare for a diviner with that level of skill to die by being possessed by an evil spirit while performing sorcery. Yet you say that the diviner was possessed by something, severed the manor master's wrist, and tried to harm him, but you stopped it? Did you think I would easily believe? Snicker. Lady Sook furrowed her brows at the sound coming from Mok Jae-un's mouth. Just a moment ago, he had been in pain. But did he just sneer now? If she hadn't misheard, that was the sound of a sneer. You. Did you just? At that moment, Mok Jae-un slowly raised his head. Seeing Mok Jae-un smiling with the corners of his mouth lifted, Lady Sook was momentarily dumbfounded. Had this fellow gone insane? No, what are you doing now? Guard Go-chan was equally perplexed. In a situation where he should be keeping his head down to avoid suspicion, what was he doing? As expected, Lady Sook spoke in a voice filled with anger. If you truly... Let's not waste each other's energy on pointless things. What? You need the manor master's seal, don't you?